Welcome to the next episode of the Flood Podcast. So excited that you were able to join me and Michael. It's been another exciting week. How about you, Michael?
I think that's just the standard theme now. I think they just get more exciting every week.
Yeah.
Last week,
I feel like with the feedback we're getting, with the conversations that are happening outside of ours, I really do feel like people are starting to resonate in ways I didn't expect with our conversation. We've talked about it many times, and even people have talked to us about it, that people will get something from our conversation as a whole. And it's exciting that um we're already getting a lot of feedback of keep going, keep pushing in on this because the conversation is exciting and we're excited to join you on it. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for hanging in there as we keep pushing into here. But like you said, anytime you're doing something that
Jeremy, I just wanted to add to what you were saying there is, it always seems to be the parts of the conversation where I'm like, oh man, I should have phrased that differently. I wish I wouldn't have said it in that way. Seems to be the things that are resonating with people. So the things that
it's
we're
true.
hard on ourselves or critical on ourselves for being are things that are really seeming to reach people.
Yeah, and me and Michael take this very serious, that we want people to realize this is just real life. This is conversation. We share our notes and our thoughts, and we see how the conversation develops. And I think that's just the whole point of this, is we want to make sure that we keep it real. So, all right, tonight we have got a lot of things to cover, but I feel like we still aren't done with this conversation on communication. Last episode, we really hit on tough conversations that you get faced with that really challenge you, but can develop you. So tonight, I kind of want to talk about the conversations you didn't expect to have, the conversations that come to you. I know this has been a kind of a theme that we laid out on episode 0, but I think it's one of those things that it's just been on my heart all week. It's how do you have that conversation that it just came out of nowhere? And we got just some bullet points here to kind of talk about, and we'll see where we're going. Some of these I struggled with and continue to struggle with when it comes to just tough topics. So, when that conversation finally turns to you, it feels like pressure. It feels like you have to perform. I used to really struggle with is defending myself. Every time I heard some sort of feedback or some sort of conversation or something, I had to defend myself and prove my point. Do you ever get faced with something like that, Michael?
Yeah, I think there's a key distinction to be made here in that's defending ourselves and getting defensive, right? If we have an opinion in a conversation, it's okay to defend that opinion, right? It's when it
Hmm.
crosses over into becoming defensive and taking what is said as personal to you. But especially in those conversations that you're referring to tonight, where you're caught off guard by them, where they come to you, I think the natural human reaction is to get defensive in those conversations.
Yeah. Well, I think in those moments, two things are going to happen. You either build trust or you break the connection you had with that person, whether it's lifetime or monumental. I know there's people in my past that I've hurt that I can't make it up. Those things were done. There'll be something I carry. I don't necessarily feel guilt about it anymore because I know I've taken it to God and asked for forgiveness. But some of those things, like I know that I've broke trust with people. I've broke, relationships in the past that it's hurtful, that whether it was my fault or the other party's fault, but in the bottom line is I ruined some good relationships. And I think it's really important to keep that in context as we're kind of talking about this tonight, because that can happen very easily. Um, One of the first things I thought we'd hit on is rushing to fill the space. Because to me, silence feels very awkward. Sometimes when people get excited or they really want to make sure they get their point out there, so they start over explaining. they start talking just rapidly, hitting you with everything they got, everything that's on their mind, everything that they can just spit out at a moment, because it could be fear driving that, it could be excitement, it could be passion, it could be they have spent 2 days getting ready for this conversation and they couldn't hold on any longer, so they just let you have it. I do know that that's happened to me before because I've been that person, but it's also happened to me where they've come running at me and just let me have it. It's like a baseball bat to the side of the head, and you weren't ready for it, but you got to respond. So how do you deal with that awkward silence, or the fast talking, or the over explaining, or all of that?
I have the absolute awful habit of when somebody's over explaining something to me, then I just write them off in that part of the conversation. And I feel like if somebody's over explaining, to me, it comes off as almost a fabrication of the truth. I tell people in a professional setting, if you're going to call in sick, just say, I'm sick. Because if you call me and say, I'm sick, I'm throwing up, I have other symptoms, and you keep going on, I think you're trying to sell me on the fact that you're sick. It's the same way in a
Hmm.
conversation. If someone is just spewing what they feel are facts and it's fast paced from a fire hose, I'm like, okay, you're trying to cover for something here. That's my natural reaction. But
Hmm.
through I would dare I even say maturity, it's that's not always it. Some people are just so nervous when they enter these conversations, and they've worked themselves up so much that when they come into the conversation, the only thing they can do is talk very fast. They want to get everything out. They want you to understand their point of view. And I think you mentioned something about silence, and I think that's really important. An important piece of conversation is silence. And silence used to drive me nuts. If I said something to someone and they responded with silence, to me, it again felt like a cover up. And I would say, why aren't you speaking? You're clearly not speaking here because I'm right and you don't know how to, first of all, don't want to say that I'm right. Second of all, you don't know how to continue to quote unquote cover.
Hmm.
Through maturity of conversation, I've recognized that maybe it's me that's coming off with that fast fire hose type of mentality, and silence is the only thing they can do is they process everything I just said and process how to respond to it. So silence is a really important part of a serious conversation, allowing people the time to process what you're saying to them, especially in the conversations that we're referring to, the ones that are catch us off guard. So
Yeah.
it took me a long time to really understand that not only is silence in a conversation okay, silence should be part of that conversation.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this with tough conversations, but I think it also applies here, that in those conversations, you shouldn't be planning your attack. You shouldn't be planning your response the whole time. You should have that moment that you've processed what they're saying so you can respond fully, versus so you can process what they're actually saying and you're involved in the conversation, just waiting to respond. And I feel like, again, this applies very much here, in that silence, even though it might feel awkward, it's necessary to so you say the right things. I've had plenty of conversations with people that they just spit words at you as fast as they can because they're not thinking about what they're saying, and they often regret what they say, or they're too prideful to say they regret what they say, but you can see it on their face. You can see when they're like, "Oh, I said too much," or "I overspoke," or "I just made this problem bigger than it was." And sometimes it's even the Russian. It's in the moment, in the heat of all of that, that they just jump in and they overreact, over respond. And then sometimes if we take it personally, it kind of leads me to my next point, is where we respond and speak from truth, not from emotion. And I think that really does hit here, because when it's your turn, it's easy to respond from being hurtful, being prideful, or that defensiveness. But the goal shouldn't be to win the moment, it's to speak what's real. I like in James 1:19, it says that let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And there's definitely not enough of that going on in this world right now. Most people are responding quick, they're speaking quick, and they don't really fully hear what the conversation was. People are not taking the time to actually hear what people are saying, because sometimes people are saying is just a response or a symptom to how they're actually feeling. It's not anything to do with what's going on. Do you remember as a kid, you somebody would run up and you'd be like, "I hate you," and you knew you never meant that, but that was the strongest thing you could respond with, because that's just how we thought through things. And it may have hurt
Have
your
you
feelings. Yeah, go ahead.
have you thought that about how social media has contributed to this form of communication? On social media, if I don't agree with what somebody has to say or posts, I can spout off without fear of repercussions. And social media has
Hmm.
allowed us all to have the outlet to post what we want, reply what we want, and and shut off the alternative, right? So I can choose to follow only people that align with my way of thinking, and I can choose to interact only with people that align with my way of thinking. Whereas people that are the antithesis of what I believe or think, I can shut them off, or I can spout off to them and move on. I think
Yeah,
it's
that's good.
kind of transitioned into everyday conversation where hey, you're wrong, I'm right. This is why, all the reasons why I'm right, and I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to take in your point of view at all, because I don't agree with you. And I think that's really, it's an interesting thought. I can't commit to if I accept that to be my truth, but I think it's an interesting thought to maybe think about communication that way, or look at it that way. That this social media has been a very interesting evolution in the way that we communicate with those that we have opposing points of views with.
Yeah, and isn't that basically speaking from emotion? And I think that's social media has become that. And this is this is you and me fighting that norm of having those conversations where we can process that. I don't want to be the one to sit there and call out people. I'm very silent on social media, on other people's posts and all that, because I just think that somebody's gotta to step up and not get in that fight that doesn't resolve anything. you know, Most of the time when you respond to somebody that's so focused on their emotional response to whatever they're reacting to, whether it's political, religious, I mean, it could be any conversation. And the problem is, I mean, the church does this as well. There's too many, even people out there bashing each other's churches or religious stance or political stance, all of that, because they just feel like their response will get more of an action. And it just shows you the immaturity of culture right now. We're jumping into this flood. We're jumping into this cavernous waterway that we just don't know how to process. Like, we're just dealing with a storm of um one-sided conversation. It's a bunch of people talking and not even wanting a reaction. They want a visceral reaction to fight. It's walking into a bar and just punching the first guy you see, just because you need that reaction. And I think that's what social media has become, is the one-sided bar fight. You punch and run, if that makes any sense.
Well, and yeah, it makes total sense. And when take that a little bit further, is I don't agree with what somebody posts. I make what I think is some hoorah statement against it, and then I watch my likes go up. I watch how many people are liking or loving or reacting
Mhm.
to what I said. And that gives you the kind of feeling that you were just discussing is, and I know this isn't about social media, but I think that it's really interesting to look at how social media has influenced how we communicate with people nowadays. And I'll just say real quick, on social media, we can be as harsh as we want to be, right? Because we don't have a fear of interacting with that person beyond just what we spout off. But in reality, we could be just as honest as we are on social media without being harsh. We can share our point of
Yes.
view with without crossing that line of being harsh. And in I know particularly in conversations that I have, when someone comes at me with what they believe is their honesty with a harsh overtone, it's going to be, that message is going to be received entirely different than the person that comes at me with honesty minus the harsh overtones. Use I statements. I feel this way because versus something harsh.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to comment on something, but I don't think it's okay when people try to throw out a self-preservation statement first. Well, I'm saying this with love. You're wrong.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
and I think we kind of grew
Yeah.
up in that in church. I'm just telling you this in love, and I'm not picking
Hmm.
on anybody
As
if
a
anybody
brother and
remembers
sister in
saying
Christ,
that.
I just fear at.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How many times did you hear, as a brother and sister in Christ, I just feel I have to share this with you? I can't tell you how many
Yeah.
times I walked away from those saying, um, yeah, I don't know
You
about
know,
that. I don't know about what you just shared.
yeah, I think anytime that I get biblical wisdom, I go to the Bible to make sure I can find it, because that's what it's all about. And if I can't validate it through my spirit and I do feel wiggly about it, I might just ignore it, because what we take in often is, what we produce out. I heard something about that what you're around eventually gets on you, and what gets on you eventually gets in you, but what has gotten in you eventually comes out of you, whether it's negative or positive. It's you're going to affect the world around you one way or another, and I don't care how
Hmm.
stone-hearted you think you are, how tough you think you are, uh how um religious, and we'll stay away from the relationship term right now, because and I'm sure we may hit on that eventually, but like, just as a generic thing, how religious you are, sometimes religious people are the scariest people to face, because they just will not see it any other way, and a lot of times what they're throwing at you isn't even accurate. Like, there's not a biblical basis that's strong enough on their argument, and it might be because they learned it wrong. It might be because they took something out of context. There's a lot of verses that you could just read part of it and, oh yeah, that's exactly what that means. No, it doesn't. But you can quickly take things out of context, and it changes everything. But just like a conversation, somebody could, well, text message conversations, right? Sometimes you get a long conversation without even somebody saying good morning, hello, how you doing. It's just, you get this 500 word essay in a text message, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Because immediately you are starting to emotionally feel, they're mad at me, they hate me, I don't know, do I still have a friend? Are they going to sue me? What is going on with this? Are they going to show up for dinner tonight? Like, it could be anything. And because sometimes we can take things out of context with a rushed conversation without knowing, because text message, I don't care. I text in capitals a lot. I used to email in capitals a lot until I got yelled at. But I realized that's not a great thing, because immediately some people, you didn't mean anything by it. But I remember those phone calls getting yelled at about, why are you yelling at me? I never was yelling at you, but it happens. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Proverbs 15:1 is another good example for speak from truth, not emotion. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I think that's pretty powerful right there. Sometimes people can come at you with complete anger, and just you responding kindly is going to throw them off their game no matter what. They're not going to know
Mhm.
how to process that, and that might be all you need to have a real conversation at that point. All right, here's another one this is a tough one. Be vulnerable without being a victim. I think there's a big difference about opening up and unloading. So vulnerability says, here's my heart, this is what I got going on. But a victim says, here's why everything is your fault. I can think of many examples of why the world where this is applicable right now. And it could be anything. It could be poor communication, it could be lack of communication, which is poor communication, but it could also be the person get what you didn't catch what you told them. They did not hear the whole thing you said, so something gets missed, and then next thing you know, they're blaming you for the world where it was a misunderstanding, or they didn't read their message, or they're like, why haven't they shown up yet? Why haven't they shown up yet? Well, you said the south side of the building, and the whole time you were on the east. It could happen, because your thought is the south is where you were, but is actually on the other side. How do you think about that one? I think vulnerability is so important these days, but there's a lot of victims out there, and it goes back to social media, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I think, Jeremy, how many times, as especially if we talk to somebody that is important to us, that we only tell our side of the conversation. And in the moments, we're playing the role of the victim that you refer to, and we get the validation that we were after. By only telling our side, playing the victim, the person that we're talking to assures us that we were absolutely right in everything we had to say as our part of the conversation, and we feel validated. It's very easy, especially if it's a relationship where you enjoy the attention from that person, and rather than trying to explain it, just come right out, with, say, your partner in life, and you come home from work after a really tough day, and you share your side of a conversation that you had, and your partner's natural reaction is to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that was a rough day. I'm so sorry that was a rough conversation." And they're giving you that validation that maybe you didn't receive in the conversation. And it's easy then to move forward with that same mindset for every conversation. Hey, the person that's most important to me validated my feelings. I can get stuck in this cycle of being the victim over and over and over again, because I'm getting the positive feelings, the warm validation from this person that's important to me. And I think it's really super critical. I mean, my partner is very good at saying things to me like, "Well, maybe they meant this." And there's times where you want to be the victim. There's times where you absolutely want validation, and my ears aren't open to the opposing viewpoint. Well, maybe they just meant this to that conversation. But when you're thinking logically, and when you're talking about being vulnerable versus being a victim, when someone that's important to you says, "Well, maybe they meant that," you have to give yourself the actual permission to think about that point of view, and allow yourself to understand the conversation from the other person's side, and think, okay, maybe they did mean that, and maybe I don't have to be a victim in this particular situation. And it's difficult, but as you recognize that there's nothing positive that can come out of being a victim, you will not have personal growth. You will not have growth professionally if you stay in that victim mindset. If every time you have a tough conversation, you are the victim, there will be no closed loops in conversations. There will be no resolutions in conversations, because I'm sitting there in the mindset of this conversation, thinking about how I'm going to walk away from this conversation and convince those that'll listen to me that I was the victim in this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think victims in the aspect of what we're talking about here tend to also be very good manipulators. And but I think that goes to what you said about the one-sided conversation. They only tell you the version that benefits them. You know, they didn't tell you that they just cussed out the person. They just tell you how the other person made them feel. And honestly, it goes back to getting things out of what you wanted. I can remember as a kid, if I wanted permission for something, I would always go to the parent that I knew would say yes for this particular ask. I've owned it, I've admitted it, I've really worked on getting away from it. I think it's an ugly behavior, but I was a good manipulator. And I'm not being proud of that, but I'm saying I can speak on it because I was that guy, like, or that kid, even, I just knew how to get a yes
Mhm.
out of every situation. And I didn't know what manipulation was back then, but it was in my spirit. Like I was that was in me. That came from somewhere. I didn't know what manipulation was. You could have told me that when I was a kid. I would have had no clue. But as I've gotten older and really dealt with that, because I realized even, you know, many years ago now, but even when I was a manager and how I was going through things, processing, I was really good at manipulating and getting what I wanted. I had great results as a leader, but I often did it through just that manipulative tactics where it wasn't bad, but it's bad. Like I got good results. I wasn't mean, but it was just that I knew the approach I was taking was manipulating people's desire to help me, desire to drive the results forward. So just how I would conduct myself, that manipulation came from a kid all the way up to an adult. And I'm glad that I've buried that because it's an ugly thing. And it's scary when you can see it in your kids as well, because you didn't teach them that, but it's already in their spirit. Like that's something that they've inherited even without seeing it. And so it's like working with the kids to be like, okay, we don't do that, but this is why, because it's really hurtful and it's really uh, damaging to relationships eventually. I know you're, a little person right now where you're a teenager or whatever it is, but like you want to be careful of those manipulative tactics.
Mhm. Mhm.
you know um by being vulnerable, I think it's a healthy conversation. It invites on understanding but not blame. You can have those tough conversations where, listen, it could be the other person's fault, but working through it, you don't have to sit there and throw daggers and damage a relationship. You can really develop a relationship just by having that conversation. All right. Next thought. This one's kind of tough too. Is and I'm just gonna I'll give you the tagline and you can run with it, Michael. So, owning your part. you know, when the conversation comes to you, it's your opportunity to take responsibility where you can. That disarms tension immediately. What does that look like? Owning your part. That's a
Yeah,
tough one.
I, yeah, it is tough, right? Based on all the things that we've already covered.
Yeah.
It's very tough, especially if you're in the mindset of winning a conversation, or which you feel is winning. Now, when keeping in mind the conversations that catch us off guard, the conversations that come
Hmm.
to us, it's we've discussed it, we've talked about it. It's a natural reaction to get defensive. It's a natural reaction to lash out and to speak quickly and fill the silence, all the things we talked about. But this one's really important.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes to me and says, you said this, this, and this, and this is how I feel about it. If my reaction is to immediately say, I'm sorry, especially if the other person is looking for a fight, especially if the other person, and not looking for a fight, meaning, what I mean by that is they expect you to respond in the ways that we've already discussed. But if you just say, I'm sorry, I accept that that's how you received the message that I was sending, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't intend it that way. This is the way that I intended it. And I'm sorry that what I said led you to feel this way. And also add on to that thank you for coming to have this conversation with me. It's very important to me when you're feeling this way that we have these conversations, that we talk through these things, that we reach a resolution. That's immediately taking all of the, not all of the energy, but all of the tension away from the conversation immediately. And now this has opened the door to a really productive conversation, one where I'm going to listen to you, you're going to listen to me. And it has to be very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that that's how you understood what I said, it has to be intentional. It has to involve the active listening that we talked about in the last episode, where we're giving that person the opportunity. If I try to cut them off immediately, one of the things that I'm extremely guilty of is when somebody has misunderstood something I've said and they come to me for clarification. One of the things I'm very guilty of is cutting them off to offer that clarification, and then thinking that has been accepted and conversation is over. But the active listening is still very important at this time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to allow them to be heard. And when you allow them to be heard, accept your portion and offer that not just this conversation we move forward from, but anytime that this arises in the future, I want you to come to me. It takes the tension out of the conversation.
Agree.
Do you
And
find that to be your experience? Yeah.
yeah, and I think any chance that and this can look so different in many opportunities. It could be something that you had no idea you did. It might be your part in what they're upset about or what they come to you about. Your part that you played in it might be very small, but I think it's so important that you take responsibility. Responsibility doesn't make you look weak, but it does strengthen your credibility, and it's one of those things where you can come out of the conversation and both feel so much better about it, because even though it might not have had really much to do with you, or it could have had everything to do with you, but owning your part, taking responsibility for, you know, all the components could save a relationship. It could build the relationship. If you're dealing with somebody that's manipulative, unfortunately, it might not solve a lot of things, but you're going to feel at peace about how you handled it, because you're doing your part. You're really just, trying to meet them somewhere and understand that they're frustrated or angry. And I mean, I've dealt with some very frustrating people, and I've responded well at times, and I have not responded well at all. I can definitely think of a couple examples of where I lost my mind in the conversation. Uh, and I didn't respond the way I should have or wanted to. Obviously, the instance that I'm thinking of, that person, somebody I worked with, and uh, the conversation got nasty so quickly, and then it might have been later that day or the next day. That person came up, apologized to me. I apologized to them, and we're like, hey, I should never have acted like that. I don't act like that. That's out of my character. And we've been cool ever since. But it was just one of those things where I got, rushed, and it was just, I think it was just building up, and both of us reacted very not kindly, but we both owned our part, at the end of it, and we both took responsibility for what we did. But it also worked out, really well after that.
Jeremy, I would just add to it. You were
Yeah.
mentioning the manipulative person. I would just add to
Hmm.
it, in those situations, um, you absolutely are going to encounter people that are attempting to manipulate you and
Hmm.
try to manipulate the response that we're discussing. But I would just offer that in those situations, this approach is for you, not for them. and
Yep.
and eventually, continuing this approach, they'll move their manipulation tactics onto somebody else. And sure, there's exceptions to everything, isn't there?
Hmm.
Some of us have people in our daily lives that have these manipulative tactics that we have to deal with on the continual, but make it about you, make it about your piece in the conversation, and I think it'll help you move forward and continue to communicate with someone that you find manipulative.
Yeah. Um, yes, absolutely agree. Next one. So, speaking with purpose, not pressure. You don't have to say everything, just say what matters. I think that is a very powerful just nugget there. How are what do you want to leave the conversation you had with them remembering? I think this goes back to, whether it's reviews or a performance conversation or even just a well done conversation. What do you want them to leave the conversation with? I've seen people just in my past have very tough performance conversations, but in the end, like, we really appreciate everything you're doing here. Have a good one. Well, you just negated everything you guys talked about because of what you said. Like, there was no, you took all the power out of the conversation you had. You didn't speak with purpose. You might have started out well, but you finished poorly because we took that conversation that had a purpose, and you set out with the expectation to have a conversation with that. But then you, for whatever reason, you got nervous and you immediately negated everything you did, and you took away all of the essence of that conversation and left him confused. I mean, I guess that's a good word. So we got to make sure that what we say matters. We don't want to leave confusing messages in our conversations.
Yeah, that's so much easier said than done, right? Especially
Hmm.
if it's with a person that we're going to have continual contact with. It is human nature for us to leave um with something like you said. I really appreciate everything you've done. Well, I you clearly didn't appreciate what led to this conversation. So
Hmm.
it it is important, and also, as we're concluding conversations, as we're reaching a conclusion, sometimes the best thing to do is just recap the conversation, short, brief summary of the conversation, and that's a conclusion. Rather than having that awkward, well, thank you, I appreciate you. These are the things that we discussed, we covered. This is what we reached as a conclusion. We're prepared to move forward from this. And that might sound too robotic too, but it avoids that confusing conclusion to the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, you know, Here's a good question that you can ask yourself. Will what I'm about to say bring life or bring damage? And I do think, actually, I had this conversation this week. You can have tough conversations kindly. If it's a conversation like to stay on the theme here, that the conversation that come running at you that you didn't expect, that you have to address this situation, whatever it is, but you can still do that kindly. You can give people, you can handle the negative conversation that comes at you with respect and kindness, and you don't have to be outlashed and rude and fix it or else or whatever. We're just, talking about performance conversation briefly, but if that's, the vein you're in right now, that if you're, you know having a conversation about toughness, you can still leave it at a tough conversation, but it can be done kindly. It doesn't need to be done disrespectfully or demoralizing. You can really be uplifting in those tough conversations. Hey, listen, what do you need from me? What is, what do you think's holding you back? What could I do here to help you succeed? You can say a lot of things, because sometimes it's just simple. Sometimes it's just like, it could be anything. It could be, I just didn't understand the process, or I don't I didn't realize there was a tool to teach me how to do what I'm struggling with, and whatever that looks like. It could be anything, and applied to pretty much anywhere, even your kids. Well, your kids do a horrible job putting the dishes in the dishwasher, but have you ever done it with them versus just told them to do it? There's a big difference between
Mhm.
after you've done it with them than
Mhm.
just letting them do it and figure it out, right? Or you go, hey, put the
Mhm.
dishes away.
Mhm.
Listen, it makes sense that the plates go with the
Mhm.
plates, but not necessarily to a teenager. Those plates could end up in every
Mhm.
cupboard. I think I found a plate in the silverware drawer before just because it fit, but they're going to kill me when they
Mhm.
watch this. But it's true though, right? Like, when we set expectations, most of the time we just got to validate. And I think that's a good part of tough conversations, and those unexpected ones. Validating why they felt the need to rush you or to just bring it out could really solve the problem just by validating why. You might not even have to say much other than that. It's just like, hey, why do you feel like this? Or why did this come out this way today? And you'd be surprised that that might solve 90% of the conversation in a whole without even getting into the weeds, because you didn't respond with anger, you didn't respond with frustration, you didn't respond with defensiveness, and all of those things are really easy to do. Like, I'm making it, trying to make it sound like it's hard to be defensive or judgmental or protective of yourself or maybe the other person that they're yelling about, but you have to have those moments of silence and pause to be able to work through that.
Yeah, and remember that validating doesn't mean agreement, right? Validating
Yes,
just
that's a big
acknowledges
deal.
that that person had feelings. It is, and a lot of people have a hard time when they hear that statement that you just made about validating, because they assume that validation means I agree with you. And it doesn't. It doesn't have to at all. It's just acknowledging
Mm-mm.
that that person had feelings about a situation. So that's important.
It's true. That's good. So I think it's really important to, even if you're not prepared for the conversation, that in that moment of silence, you're asking yourself, am I gonna destroy them here, or am I gonna figure out a way to uplift them and figure out how to bring some change or some life to this conversation? Because I find most of the time what people are upset about isn't what they're saying in the moment. It's always something else,
Hmm.
but they just don't know how to articulate it.
Hmm.
They don't know, they might not even feel comfortable saying what they're really feeling, because they're trying to get it out, but they just, for whatever reason, they can't. Like, they're just protective of saying that piece. So this leads me
Yep.
to um the last one I think we'll hit on for this conversation. Don't defend, clarify. So defensiveness creates walls, clarify creates bridges. Instead of, that's not what I meant, try, let me explain my heart behind it. So when you get rushed with that conversation, you might have to think about um getting that clarifying thing. You're throwing out the bridge, you're throwing out the safety rope, that you're throwing out the life ring there, into the water to say, hey, listen, it's still your platform. You came to me with this. Let's talk about it. Like, what exactly are you talking about? Because we kind of mentioned it, but sometimes they're going to rapid fire so quick, you might not even be able to capture half of it. So you want to kind of circle back and keep that platform theirs. So it's not that you give up control. It's that you share the conversation because you still let them have the stage, unless
Yeah.
it's dangerous or something. But I don't think that's usually how it goes, but it does. I mean, it could happen.
Tell me how many times when somebody's approached you and you said, "That's not what I meant." How many times has that been successful? Probably very close to 0, right? Because it
Almost
doesn't matter
never.
what you meant. Yeah. It really does not matter what you meant. Your message was as good as it was received. So they heard what they heard, and their truth is their truth. So greeting that with, "That's not what I meant," and especially I envision myself in this conversation, and it would be my response would be more like, that's not what I meant. Now I've offered words of not validating what they're coming to me with, and I've also offered an expression or nonverbal communication that has sent them the message that I I don't agree at all with what they are saying, or I don't validate their feelings in this conversation. I think that's really important. Is and it goes back to we keep going back to this active listening, right? But it goes back to that and letting them get it all out, and then allow me to explain, allow me to attempt the message again, allow me to repackage this and send it to you in a way that maybe you can receive. So, good point.
Yeah, just how you kind of said that. I think so. I've been using a little bit of scripture tonight, but I think Proverbs 15:28 says, "The heart of the righteous studies how to answer," and I think how we respond there could be a universal approach to that in a lot of conversations, because clarify, ask questions based on what they said because you were being an active listener. You're not creating your defense while they're spilling everything and you're really missing the context of the conversation. You're not seeing through what they're talking about to get to the real root cause. Um, I've seen it all happen, and
Mhm.
I'll just use, retail, for example. Um, Employees are like, um, yeah, I'm only getting a couple, shifts a week. I wish I had more. But nobody ever had the conversation with them that they're not meeting any expectations. They show up late every shift. They always ask to leave early. So instead of talking to them about what you're observing, or the team's observing, you're just punishing them without cause. So you're they're they're talking about a symptom, but they don't know that there was a problem to begin with, and I think that kind of happens in
Mhm.
life all the time. Sometimes you blast your kids about something, um or yell at the dog 40 minutes later after she did something, and they just look at you like they have no idea what you're talking about. And the kids are like, "Well, I
Mhm.
didn't know," and sometimes you don't even give them a chance to discuss it. And I'm just kind of telling on myself here, but sometimes you just get frustrated because you're like, "You should already know how to do that." Well, I didn't give them an opportunity to find out if they did know how to do that. And I think that's most
Yeah.
often, it's kind of like putting away the dishes, right? Maybe
Mhm.
we never challenged to find out if they actually knew how to do it. Or go do your
Mhm.
laundry. Do they
Mhm.
know how to do the laundry? Do they know how to, whatever it is? If they don't understand the expectation, they might disappoint you. And that disappointment will go unsaid, because next thing you're just going to, again, you have an opportunity to respond correctly here and uplift and teach them. But most often we revert to what's convenient, and it's usually not good. I don't mean to laugh, but it's usually not good. I just because I'm thinking back of all the dumb things I've done over the past, like, oh, I could have said that much better. I could have said that more effectively. I could have helped them there. Uh, and I always tell people that anytime you have a
I
tough
laugh and
conversation,
smile because
yeah, go ahead.
and I laugh and smile because I think through these conversations that we're having, we're both coming to realizations within our own lives of things that we could certainly be doing better. So this has been beneficial to us both as well.
Absolutely. Well, and it's a reminder. It kind of shows you what we have worked on and what we got to work on, and the consistency in our own life. And that's the whole point of
Mm-hmm.
this is that we're growing. We're still growing through this. We're not going to get it right. You might be really kind in response to everything your kid does until they break your favorite picture or they tear your whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you lose it because you immediately forget what you've been working on, because it's easy to do that. Um it's easy to respond inappropriately versus handling it correctly all the time. And that's why we just want to bring it
Mm-hmm.
to the forefront to say, hey, listen, you're not going to get it right every time. But,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, even if you don't get it right all the time, sometimes even just owning to your kids that, hey, I'm trying. I'm going to focus on getting
Mm-hmm.
better. I'm sorry I responded
Mm-hmm.
the way I did. It goes a long way, whether it's employees or
Mm-hmm.
coworkers or your children or your spouse. Sometimes they might not want to hear it, but it's something that's necessary, is owning that. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all right. A thoughtful response is a spiritual discipline. And all I simply mean by that is how you approach anything like this, whether it's, conversations planned out, not planned out, attacked, whatever, how you respond it just shows like how you're living your life. Like, are you focused on, being a better person? Are you focused on, uh, the more you get to know Christ in a Christ relationship, if you are living out that life with God, and I know we've kind of mentioned this before, it's it's in my opinion, it's the best way to live, because I realize how much of life I screw up when I take the lead, and how often I get it wrong, but I get it a lot more right when God's leading me. And I think it's just key to living this correctly. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
know we're gonna wrap up here soon. We're approaching the hour mark, and but I had a one more question, which I think kind of sums up just communication all the way through the last couple episodes. But why do you think we hold on to unhealthy relationships? You know, and what I mean is, what keeps us tied to some of those conversations that, or those people that we just can't let go of? What do you think, is a driver of that?
Yeah, I think the answer here is really multifaceted for me. One, I don't like to give up on people. I
Yeah.
have this belief that people are inherently good until they prove otherwise. And then I give them 482 chances to prove otherwise. And I also have this inflated sense of self where I feel like, yeah, okay, the relationship or the conversation isn't going well this time, but if I just say this or just offer this, it's going to change the tide of this relationship or friendship. If I just behave this way, then it's what they need for this relationship to be successful, and it'll be able to move forward. I think another aspect of it is sometimes conclusions are just hard. Sometimes
Hmm.
endings are just hard. And we don't, I know who you are as a person, Jeremy, and I know who I am. And we don't like to give up. We don't like to give up on people. And endings are hard and a contributing factor to that. And I always feel you and I have talked about, and you just explicitly mentioned leading a Christ centered life, what that does for you. And I've always thought that um, if Christ wouldn't give up on somebody, why would I? And sometimes that's not my responsibility, right? Sometimes
Hmm.
I've done everything I absolutely can, and I'm not saying I always do it right, because there's plenty of times that I from walk away from a friendship or a relationship and make a decision that, there's nothing I can do anymore. For whatever reason, I'm not jiving with that person. If my It might be me, it might be them, it's just not working out. And as I think about it afterwards, um, I'm like, I can't walk away. Endings are hard, and I don't like to give up on people. And I end up in the same spot over and over and over again. And maybe as long as I don't get too emotionally attached to it, that's fine, because eventually there'll be breakthrough. Eventually there will be a positive outcome from it. But it's important to know when to walk away, to take your hands off a situation. And it doesn't mean it has to be permanent. It's in those moments, in those times, that I really spend a great deal of time in prayer for
Hmm.
that particular situation, and that might circle back around. How do you feel about it?
Well, I agree with you. I think for me, unhealthy relationships, we tend to hold on to them. One, because of history, one, because of comfortability, two, because I feel like everything has a value to it. And my time is very precious. And sometimes, and I think everybody should treat time that way. It's the one thing you can't get back. I think sometimes we're guilty of assigning such a strong value, even if the relationship's unhealthy. It could be a one sided relationship. It could be, and I'm not talking about deep abusive relationships here. But I mean, that's a thing. I mean, and there's people that stay there because they don't want to change. They are afraid of, they've got too much history, whether it's good or bad. Uh, Sometimes people cling to those memories of what was. I've been talking about this a lot lately, walking into offices and seeing the memorial of the past, the memorial of what was. I'm like, where's the wall of what we're doing? Where's the wall of what we're creating? What's the wall of where we're going versus,
Mm.
all the past, and I mean, just even seeing some awards from like 1991, just old stuff that it's like, guys, that's great, but we're so far away from what that company was now, that what are we doing now? Like, how are we creating the next set of excitement and rewards? And I'm really challenging people on that thought process, is what are we creating new that is leaving a new mark? Scars are memories, and that's kind of like how for whatever reason I felt like this memoriam of the past is almost like old scars, right? Like, they're there, you remember it, good or bad, but scars typically show where you were, what your past did hold. And I think that's what sometimes some of these relationships we hold on to are just straight up, they're scars. And sometimes we can't find a way to part with them. We can't find a way to separate ourselves from it, and we're too afraid to make new memories. We're too afraid to make new adventures, because it changes the comfortability of what we have. So it's basically what I feel about it. Like, I think we do, I think we hold on to the past more than we realize. I feel um I feel like there's definitely people, in my life that maybe I haven't consciously like let go of, but it happens because, the paths that you might be on are completely different. The situations that you have experienced like are completely different. Your views can dictate, but I do know the five closest people to you is going to kind of show where your life is going 5 years from now. And It's kind of one of those moments where, if you want to know what your life's going to look like, just look who you're hanging out with, because it
Mm,
has so much more influence on you than people realize. And
hmm
I think that's why you have to watch who your kids are hanging out with and pay attention to what they're doing and what they're into, because
hmm
you're looking at a glimpse of their future.
hmm
And we got to be mindful of that, for ourselves, for our families, for, even people that you work with. I've always challenged myself to be the least knowledgeable person in the room, because I'm the fastest growing at that point. Just challenging yourself to just always be the one in the room that's absorbing the most. I think I heard somebody um about Mark Cuban, and he was talking about he was showing up to all the meetings just wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and everybody else is in suits and ties, and they're like, um I can't believe you would show up to a meeting like this. And he's like, I got nothing to prove. He's basically said, I'm the most dangerous guy in the room because I am unique. I'm different. I look at things. I don't have to prove to anybody, because I'm just constantly just worried about proving to myself, that I can do what I'm doing. And it just, I don't know. Like when I heard that him say something about like, I'm not afraid to show up in a t-shirt and jeans. I'm like, yes, that's what I feel like, t-shirt and jeans, man, t-shirt and jeans. But cool. Well, listen, we've had a good conversation tonight. I feel like everybody can relate to a conversation you didn't expect. Just not necessarily being prepared, but having thought out, how do I respond when something like this happens? I feel like there is a little bit of a roadmap, and we kind of hit on that tonight, is that there's a way to
hmm
respond productively and kindly and
hmm
purposefully, which will preserve those relationships. It will get you to a resolution way faster than just an uncomfortable response. You got any closing words?
No, I think you summed it up nicely. You might not have the words, but if you have the thought process of how to encounter these conversations, certainly can help you in the future when these conversations arise. And certainly, always look for what you can learn in the conversation, because there are lessons to learn, whether it's how you anticipate these conversations and cut them off before they have to happen, whether it's how you learn from that particular conversation and carry those lessons forward for the next time you encounter it. But no, I think that's it, Jeremy. I think the only thing I would add is when you talked about the scars and the memories from the scars, I think you can also look at scars as growth too, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important. As we try to advance, become better people every single day, those scars are part of your story, and if you
Absolutely.
look at them as growth, I think that provides a very unique opportunity for you as well.
That's good. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight on The Flood. We'll be popping up again somewhere, and then we'll see you next Friday. So have a good one. Thank you.